I was standing at the edge of my front yard, water up to my ankles, holding onto my daughter's wheelchair with both hands. The flood had come fast, swallowing up the street in minutes, but we weren't panicking. Not yet. I'd already called for help, and I knew someone was on their way. What I didn't expect, what I could have never imagined, was her. Karen. Tan trench coat, clipboard in hand, standing dry on her porch across the street like she was monitoring some petty neighborhood bake sale. She didn't run to help. She didn't ask if my daughter was okay. She just marched straight over like she owned the block. "You can't be here," she snapped, eyes darting between the water and the wheelchair. "This isn't handicap accessible. HOA policy says." "Are you serious right now?" I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "My daughter is paralyzed and the house is flooding. I just need to get her to the truck." She folded her arms. "Then maybe you shouldn't live here if you can't follow the rules." I didn't even know what to say. My daughter, Kayla, looked up at me, scared. She wasn't crying. She didn't want to, but I could see the panic building in her eyes. That's when Karen stepped closer. Too close. "You're blocking the sidewalk," she hissed, grabbing the handles of the wheelchair. "Don't touch her," I warned. But she already had. One hard shove. 1 second of her twisted idea of control. The chair tilted, hit a submerged curb, and Kayla went flying into the cold, dirty water. I screamed. My body moved before my brain did. I jumped in, lifting Kayla up as fast as I could. She was coughing, shivering, terrified. Karen just stood there watching like it was some game. "You're done here," she said. "I'm calling the HOA and the sheriff. You people think rules don't apply to you." I stared at her, soaked, holding my shaking daughter in my arms, and I felt something in me snap. Not rage, not fear, just certainty. She had no idea who she'd just messed with. And that's when I heard it. The sound of blades. Fast, low, loud. A military chopper was coming. Exactly 3 minutes after Kayla hit the water. The helicopter hovered lower, its roar drowning out Karen's latest rant. She backed away, suddenly unsure of herself, her hand still clutching that useless clipboard like it could protect her. I held Kayla tighter as the gust from the rotors rippled through the water, lifting debris and snapping the HOA flyer Karen had taped to my garage door just an hour earlier. A soldier dropped down, fast, efficient, no hesitation. He moved straight toward us, head set on, eyes sharp, not a second wasted. "Ma'am, are you and the girl okay?" he asked, kneeling beside me. I nodded, still trying to process how quickly everything had changed. "We're fine now, I think." Karen stepped forward, voice shrill. "Excuse me, this is a private neighborhood. Who authorized this helicopter?" The soldier didn't even turn to her. He pulled out a radio. "Target located, civilian child secure, proceeding with evac." Karen's jaw dropped. "What target? Wait, who are you people?" That's when the second chopper came into view. Bigger, marked with a seal she didn't recognize, but I did. It wasn't just a rescue team, it was a special unit, and they weren't here by accident. Karen shouted again, her voice cracking. "You can't do this. I'm on the board. This is against regulation." The soldier finally looked at her, not angry, not even bothered, just calm. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you assaulted a disabled child in a federal disaster zone. You might want to stop talking." She blinked. For the first time, she looked like she realized she wasn't in control anymore. I turned toward the soldier. "How did you get here so fast?" He glanced at Kayla, then back at me. "You triggered a priority code when you used the vet line. That alert goes to a different level." Karen's eyes widened. "Vet line? What are you talking about?" I didn't answer her, but the truth was, she didn't just shove a kid into floodwater. She shoved the daughter of a former military analyst who still had direct access to an emergency channel. And now, things were just getting started. Karen stood frozen, her lips twitching like she wanted to scream but couldn't find the words. The soldier radioed in again, signaling for backup, while another team approached from the truck parked at the corner. Black, armored, unmarked. Not police. Something higher. Kayla clung to me, still shivering, but she kept looking back at Karen with wide eyes. Mom, why did she do that to me? I didn't know what to say. There wasn't a good answer. But I whispered, she thought she had power, she doesn't. Karen suddenly pointed at me like she was building courage out of pure delusion. She's lying. This is a stunt. They faked this to make me look bad. She doesn't belong in this neighborhood anyway. One of the men walking toward us paused. He wasn't wearing any standard uniform, just dark tactical gear and a badge clipped low on his vest. He looked at Karen like he was studying something under a microscope. Name? He asked flatly. She scoffed. Excuse me? Your full name. Now. I don't have to give you anything, she stammered. This is my neighborhood. He turned to the soldier beside me. Get her statement recorded. She's already admitted to pushing the child. We've got partial video from the drone. Karen paled. What drone? He didn't answer, but I knew. I'd seen it once before. Tiny. Silent. The kind used in high-alert rescue zones, equipped with facial tracking and real-time feed to Homeland Security. Because this wasn't just a flood. This was a Level 3 federal emergency zone. And Karen had just committed an assault in front of federal eyes. The man looked back at me. Ma'am, do you wish to press charges? I glanced down at Kayla. Her lips were blue, her hair wet and tangled, but she nodded slowly. I looked up. Yes. And I want her removed from this property immediately. Karen's face twisted. Removed? You can't remove me. I'm the HOA president. That's when the man pulled out a small tablet. He tapped the screen twice and showed it to her. This neighborhood, he said, it's actually government-backed land leased through a special veterans housing program. Guess whose name is on the title deed? He turned the screen toward her. My name. Karen stared at the screen like it had just slapped her across the face. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She blinked twice, trying to process it. That can't be right, she muttered. There must be a mistake. I checked the HOA files myself. The man didn't flinch. Then you missed the amendment filed 2 years ago under the Veterans Rehabilitation Housing Act. This property and 5 others on this street were reassigned under federal protection. He looked back at me. You were cleared through military protocol. I stayed quiet. I didn't need to say anything. Karen was spiraling now. But, the neighborhood vote. We decided to remove people who... You decided? He cut in sharply. Because according to this, he lifted the tablet. There was no formal vote filed, no public notification, and no approval from the oversight board. What you did was illegal. She took a shaky step back, like the water was finally starting to rise beneath her feet. I didn't mean harm. I was just enforcing the standards. The soldier who had helped Kayla earlier leaned in, calm but firm. You pushed a disabled child into floodwater. You don't get to spin that. Karen's eyes suddenly darted around, looking for someone, anyone, to back her up. But the neighbors were gone. Most had already evacuated. The few left were watching. From behind windows. Not one came outside. Then came the twist I didn't even see coming. The man with the tablet turned back to me. Ma'am, there's more. This isn't the first complaint filed against her. What? I asked. He nodded. 3 other families, false citations, harassment. One even had surveillance footage of her entering their backyard without permission. Karen's face drained of all color. She's been impersonating a board with no legal status, using forged documents, and threatening residents under fake authority. I narrowed my eyes. So what happens now? He slipped the tablet into his vest. She's being detained for federal questioning. The charges could include assault on a protected minor, impersonation of an official, and obstruction in a disaster zone. Karen finally lost it. "You can't arrest me. I am the HOA." Two agents stepped forward and gently, but firmly, cuffed her hands. The last thing she screamed before being led into the truck was, "This isn't over." But even she knew it was. The sound of the truck door slamming shut echoed across the flooded street like a final judgment. Karen was gone, still yelling inside, but muffled now, powerless. Kayla leaned her head against my shoulder, exhausted. I could feel her tiny breaths slowing down, her body finally starting to calm. One of the medics stepped over, wrapped a blanket around her, and gave me a quiet nod. But just when I thought the chaos was behind us, the man in tactical gear came back over. "There's something else," he said, voice low. I braced myself. "What now?" He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. She wasn't acting alone. I blinked. "What do you mean?" She had help from someone on the city zoning board. We found an email chain. She was trying to force certain families out so she could push a redevelopment deal. I felt my stomach tighten. "You're saying she was trying to take over the neighborhood?" "More than that, she had a buyer lined up, private real estate group. They were offering bonuses for every property she could clear, especially ones owned by veterans or immigrants, anyone less likely to fight back." I stared at him, stunned. "And she thought I'd just leave?" "She didn't know who you were." He gave a slight smile. "Or that we'd be monitoring this area because of who lives here." That's when it hit me. Karen hadn't just been cruel, she'd been calculated. This wasn't about an HOA policy. It was about money, control. She didn't care about rules. She cared about getting rid of people who didn't fit her version of the neighborhood, and Kayla was just in her way. The medic waved us over to a waiting van. "We'll get her checked at base camp," he said. I carried Kayla in and sat beside her. As we pulled away, I looked out the window. Karen's house stood there, fancy, perfect, and completely empty. She built her little kingdom on lies, and it fell in one flood. Kayla looked up at me and whispered, "Mom, are we safe now?" I brushed her wet hair from her face and kissed her forehead. "Yeah, baby," I said. "We're more than safe." We arrived at the temporary base camp set up just beyond the flood zone. Tents, flashing lights, soldiers moving with purpose. Everything felt surreal. Medics rushed Kayla into a warm tent, wrapped her in dry blankets, and began checking her vitals. She clutched a stuffed bear someone handed her like it was a lifeline. I stood just outside the flap, soaking wet, arms crossed, still trying to wrap my head around everything. Then I saw him. Colonel Reeves. He hadn't changed much since I last saw him. Same sharp eyes, same voice that could silence a room. He walked straight toward me with a clipboard in one hand and purpose in the other. "I heard what happened," he said. "You always seem to pop up when things go south," I muttered with a tired smile. He looked over at Kayla through the tense clear plastic window. "That little girl, she's tougher than most men I've trained. She gets it from her mom," I said quietly. He handed me a folder. "This is everything we pulled from her laptop, phone, and that email trail. Karen wasn't just trying to force you out. She was building a blueprint to gentrify the entire block. You were the test run." I opened the folder. Names, addresses, red dots on maps, families. Some I knew. Most had already left. Forced out by fines, threats, mysterious complaints they couldn't prove. "She made it look like an HOA purge," I whispered. "But it was a takeover." He nodded grimly. "And now it's a criminal conspiracy. Her arrest triggered an investigation at City Hall. Half her emails bounced off a councilman's private server." The pieces were falling faster than I could keep up. "She thought I was just a single mom," I said. "She didn't know who I used to be." Reeves smirked. "She didn't know who you still are." He handed me one more envelope. "You're going to want to open this with your daughter. What is it?" "Let's just say, the military doesn't forget its own, especially not when their family gets thrown into a flood." Back inside the medical tent, Kayla was resting, her small hand still gripping the bear. She looked up when I sat beside her and gave me a tired smile. "Mom, that lady's not coming back, right?" I shook my head gently. "No, sweetheart. She's gone." I pulled out the envelope Colonel Reeves had given me. It was sealed with a thin strip of tape, no label, just a small government crest stamped on the corner. "What's that?" Kayla asked, sitting up a little. "Something important," I said, tearing it open carefully. Inside was a letter. Short, direct, military style. "Due to your prior service and the recent events, your application for permanent housing assistance has been expedited and approved. In addition, the property listed under your name is now protected under Section 18 of the Veteran Emergency Housing Act. No individual or organization may file occupancy challenges without direct federal review." At the bottom, 2 words were, handwritten, "Stay strong." I let out a slow breath, the weight on my chest finally lifting. Kayla tilted her head. "What does it mean?" "It means no one can ever try to take our home again," I said, showing her the paper. "Not the HOA, not Karen. No one." She smiled and leaned her head on my arm. "Good. I like our house, even with the old mailbox." I laughed softly. "We'll fix the mailbox." Just then, one of the neighbors who had stayed behind, Mrs. Langley, a retired nurse from across the street, stepped into the tent with a tray of warm drinks. "Thought you might need something comforting," she said kindly. She sat beside us and gave Kayla a hot chocolate. Then she looked at me and whispered, "We all saw what she did. I'm sorry we didn't speak up sooner." "You're speaking now," I said. "That's what matters." She nodded. "You've got people behind you now." She ruled through fear, but not anymore. I looked around the tent. More families were trickling in, neighbors, friends, all with their own stories. Some afraid, some angry, some just relieved it was finally over. Karen had tried to divide us, but now somehow we were more united than ever. A week later, the floodwaters had receded, but the impact hadn't washed away. Streets were still muddy. Houses wore the scars of the storm. But there was something different now. People were talking to each other, helping, watching each other's backs. Kayla stood next to me on our front porch, holding a small flag in her hand. The new mailbox, painted red, white, and blue by the neighbors, stood proudly at the curb. She smiled at it like it was the coolest thing she'd ever seen. Across the street, a few of the guys were fixing up old Mr. Alvarez's porch. 2 doors down, someone was putting up a welcome sign for a family that had returned. Everyone was pitching in. Karen's house sat empty, a for sale sign crooked in the front lawn. The once pristine yard now overgrown and silent. Nobody missed. The investigation had gone public. News vans had rolled through. Karen's face was all over local TV. Fake HOA leader charged in federal conspiracy. She was facing trial, and word was more names from City Hall were coming out every day. Justice wasn't just served. It was loud. I sat on the porch, steps with Kayla, watching her wave her little flag like it was the 4th of July. "Mom," she said suddenly, "does this mean you're kinda like a superhero?" I laughed. "No, baby, I'm just someone who didn't back down." She looked thoughtful for a second. "But superheroes protect people, right?" I put my arm around her. "Then maybe we both are." She leaned against me and whispered, "I'm glad she's gone." "Me too," I said, staring out at the street, our street. "But remember something, Kayla. When people act like they own everything, it's usually because they're scared of losing control." She nodded, slowly. "But they don't get to decide who belongs." "No," I said, "they don't." And as the sun broke through the clouds above our neighborhood, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a story about Karen. It was about every family she tried to erase, every quiet voice she tried to silence. And how, in the end, the people she thought were weak turned out to be stronger than she ever imagined. The end. She stood right there at the gate, arms crossed like she owned the whole place. The disabled girl in the wheelchair rolled up slowly, asking politely, "Can I get some help with my order, please?" But Karen, the lady with the sharp glare and a name tag that said manager, just sneered and said, "We don't serve people like you here." The whole small airport cafe went silent. People stared, unsure if they heard right. Just then, a woman in a business suit stepped forward. She was calm, but you could see the fire in her eyes. "Excuse me?" she said. The woman in the wheelchair looked up and smiled weakly, but Karen's attitude didn't change. "I said no service," Karen repeated, her voice cold and sharp like she thought she was above everyone else. The CEO mom didn't move at first, watching Karen with a quiet smile. Then suddenly, she pulled out her phone and dialed. Karen's face went pale when she heard, "This is Ms. Reynolds, CEO of Sky High Airlines. I'm on this flight, and I want to report your behavior right now." Karen stammered, trying to explain herself, but the woman cut her off. "You're going to lose your job. Right here, right now." Karen's mouth opened like she wanted to shout, but the CEO mom held up a hand. "Mid-air firing, Karen. Pack your things." Passengers around them started whispering, some even filming. The disabled girl's eyes sparkled with hope, and the CEO mom gave her a gentle nod. What Karen didn't know was this wasn't just about one rude moment. It was about justice taking flight. Karen's face twisted with anger as she grabbed her things, muttering, "You can't do this to me. I'm the manager here." But the CEO mom didn't flinch. "Not on my plane, not in my company," she said firmly, her voice carrying through the cabin. Passengers whispered and exchanged looks. No one had ever seen someone get fired mid-flight like this. The disabled girl, still in her wheelchair, watched quietly. Suddenly, Karen turned toward her, eyes full of venom. "You think you're special just because you have a fancy mom?" She sneered. The girl's smile disappeared for a moment, but then she looked straight at Karen and said, "You're the one who doesn't understand respect." The cabin fell silent again. Just then, the CEO mom leaned in close to Karen, whispering loud enough for the whole row to hear. "By the way, that manager title? Fake. You never got certified, and I've got proof. HR's been watching you for months." Karen's jaw dropped and panic flashed in her eyes. The flight attendants moved closer, ready to back the CEO up if needed. But here's the twist no one expected. Karen suddenly pulled out her phone and pressed record. "I'm going to make sure everyone sees how you treat your employees," she hissed. The CEO mom smiled coldly. "Good luck with that. I've got cameras everywhere too." The battle wasn't over yet, and everyone knew this flight was about to get a lot more interesting. Karen's fingers trembled as she held the phone, ready to blast the CEO mom online. But before she could press record, the cabin lights flickered and the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've just received a message that this flight's security footage is now being monitored live by headquarters." A murmur spread through the plane. The CEO mom's calm confidence grew. "See, Karen, your little stunt is already on camera, from every angle." Karen's face turned bright red. She looked around, realizing the whole plane was watching, her like a guilty child caught in the act. Then the disabled girl's voice rang out clear and strong. "People like you don't get to decide who deserves respect." The CEO mom nodded and added, "And I don't tolerate discrimination, especially from someone pretending to be a manager." Karen tried to argue, but her words lost power as passengers began whispering about filing complaints. Just when it seemed Karen might finally back down, she blurted, "You think I'm scared? I have connections. You'll regret this." The CEO mom smiled wider. "Funny you say that. I'm the daughter of a retired sheriff, and my mother trained SWAT teams. We don't scare easy." The tension in the cabin was thick, and everyone waited to see what Karen would do next. Karen's eyes darted nervously as she realized her threats weren't working. The CEO mom stood tall, her voice steady but sharp. "Here's the truth, Karen. You've been abusing your authority for months, pushing people around, breaking company rules. Today you crossed the line." Passengers pulled out their phones, some already streaming live. Suddenly, a flight attendant stepped forward holding a folder. "Ms. Reynolds, we've got reports from other employees about Karen's behavior. She's been putting disabled customers through hell." The CEO mom nodded. "That's enough." She turned to Karen one last time. "You're done here. Security will meet us on landing." But Karen wasn't done yet. She raised her voice. "You think firing me is the end? I'll sue all of you." The CEO mom didn't blink. "Good luck with that. We have every conversation recorded. You broke the law." The disabled girl smiled, squeezing her mom's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. The CEO mom looked out the window, then back at Karen. "This isn't just about you, it's about every person who deserves dignity." The cabin erupted in applause. Karen slumped back into her seat, defeated as the flight continued. But the biggest twist was still waiting, one no one saw coming. Just as the plane started its descent, the CEO mom's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her eyes widening. "Everyone, listen up," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "I just got confirmation. The company's board has reviewed all the evidence and Karen has been suspended indefinitely. They're launching a full investigation." Passengers exchanged surprised looks. Karen's face drained of color. She tried to protest, but a sharp look from the CEO mom silenced her. Then came the real shock. The CEO mom stood and addressed the cabin. "Also the disabled girl here? She's not just any passenger, her family owns a large part of this airport. They've been fighting for accessibility upgrades for years." Whispers filled the air. Karen's entitlement suddenly seemed small and ridiculous. The disabled girl smiled shyly, then said, "Sometimes people forget who they're dealing with." The CEO mom nodded. "Exactly. And respect isn't optional." The plane touched down to applause, but the story was far from over. What happened next would shake the company to its core and teach Karen a lesson she'd never forget. As the plane landed, security officers were waiting by the gate. Karen was quietly escorted off, still muttering about unfair treatment. Meanwhile, the CEO mom stayed calm, kneeling down to check on the disabled girl. "You did great today," she said softly. The girl smiled, feeling stronger than ever. But here's the real twist no one saw coming. Just as the CEO mom was about to leave, a reporter stepped forward, holding up a camera. "Ms. Reynolds, do you have a message for others who face discrimination?" she asked. Without missing a beat, the CEO mom looked straight into the lens and said, "Never be silent, stand up. Because sometimes justice comes when you least expect it, right in the middle of a flight." The crowd around them nodded, some wiping away tears. Karen's story was already going viral, but this moment, it became a symbol of hope. And for the disabled girl, it wasn't just a victory, it was a new beginning. Back at the airport lounge, the CEO mom received a call from the company's headquarters. "We're launching a new training program on respect and accessibility, thanks to your courage," the voice said. She smiled, knowing this fight was bigger than just one flight. Meanwhile, Karen's fake manager credentials were exposed publicly, and she was banned from working in the airline industry. The disabled girl's family also announced a new fund to help improve airport services for people with disabilities nationwide. As the CEO mom looked out over the runway, she thought quietly, "It's not just about firing one Karen. It's about changing the system, one act of courage at a time." The story ended with hope, justice, and a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices make the biggest impact.